Bernardo by playing the tapes, frame by frame in open court. At first, it seems the videos are nothing more than homemade pornographic movies, the stars of which are Bernardo and Homolka. As the tapes play on, other characters appear who are restrained, clearly in pain and suffering, and forced to endure humiliating abuse. The victims are easily identifiable as 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey and 15-year-old Kristen French. While their deaths are not on the tapes, brutal violence is, including the sexual assaults. It proves more than the victims' families could bear. Analysis of the tapes takes weeks. The first person to be questioned about their content is Karla Homolka. She's the prosecution's witness, so they begin by attempting to portray her as just another one of Bernardo's victims. A victim who is forced into watching rape and murder by her husband.
But you know what? She did cry a number of times, but she was very composed and she handled herself extremely well.
John Rosen's task is to undermine her claims in his cross-examination.
I had to break her down in terms of credibility. I had to demonstrate that she was no victim, that she was a perpetrator.
What follows is a classic courtroom confrontation. Rosen's aim is to remind the court who the real victims are.
I said, here's poor Kristen, dead, cleaned, washed, and dead. Right. I said, you're no victim.
After 9 days on the witness stand in her husband Paul Bernardo's murder trial, Karla Homolka's testimony comes to an end. Bernardo's attorney now gives the court his account of what really happened to Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French in 1991. The defense claims Bernardo only intends to kidnap and rape, and the idea of murder is always Homolka's. The first victim, Leslie Mahaffey, is abducted, and then crucially, Rosen argues, she's blindfolded by Bernardo before being raped.
He just came across her and decided on a spur of a moment to kidnap her and use her as a sexual toy. So he blindfolded her so she wouldn't see him, which again lends credence to the fact that he intended to let her go.
Rosen claims everything changes when Homolka removes the blindfold, something she denies doing. But now Leslie can identify her abusers. They'll have to kill her. After 24 hours of rape and abuse, Mahaffey is strangled, Rosen claims, by Homolka. Again, something she denies. And according to Rosen, Karla Homolka takes charge of destroying any evidence.
There was a decision to dispose of the body by sawing her up into pieces. Karla was there with the tarp, and Karla scrubbed that basement floor to make sure there wasn't one shred of Leslie Mahaffey in that house, and the police never found anything.
Homolka denies this allegation, too. Rosen moves on to say how he believes their second victim, Kristen French, is killed. Homolka and Bernardo stalk her and abduct her as she walks home from school. They take her back to their house and hold her captive.
Kristen French was this naive young girl in a private Catholic school who'd been scooped off the street by both of them, and that was horrible enough.
Homolka videotapes Bernardo raping Kristen before joining in the rape and abuse herself.
And then to be subjected to gross indignities during the course of the sexual assault. And, but a very, very, very strong and feisty little girl.
Despite putting up a determined fight, Kristen French is savagely abused over the course of 3 days and then suffocated. And yet again, Rosen argues that it's Homolka who takes charge of destroying the evidence. Though yet again, she denies it.
She had been showered and washed and all the forensic evidence gone And that was all Carla. Carla wanted to make sure they didn't get caught. She made sure that things were cleaned up and so forth. And so from that view of the evidence, I took the position he wasn't the killer.
Throughout the trial, Homolka denies being a willing accomplice, insisting she too was a victim. After 18 weeks of argument, everything depends on whose account the jury believes, Homolka's or Bernardo's. On August 31st, the jury is sent out of the court to consider their verdict.
When we were dismissed to reach a verdict, it took us 1.5 days, the second day, and we had reached a verdict unanimously, the 12 of us, on all 9 charges against Paul Bernardo. It was unanimous and he was guilty on each count.
2 weeks later, 31-year-old Paul Bernardo is sentenced to 25 years in prison. Though in Canada, he's considered a dangerous offender, which means it's unlikely he'll ever be released. But Bernardo's sentence is not the end of the story. Only after the trial is finished, as the media blackout is lifted, does the press and public begin to learn about Homolka's plea bargain. One chilling story emerges that casts doubt on Homolka's claim that she is just another of Bernardo's victims. Just after Paul Bernardo's sentencing, a disturbing story involving him and Carla Homolka is revealed. On Christmas Eve 1990, 6 months before Carla and Paul marry, her sister Tammy, aged 14, is found dead, having choked on her own vomit. At the time, it's thought it's just a tragic accident. But during her secret plea bargain hearing, Carla Homolka reveals that her death is anything but.
She was also a participant in the death of her sister, Tammy Homolka. Not in circumstances that amounted to murder, but circumstances that amounted to manslaughter, still a homicide, an unlawful killing.
14-year-old Tammy Homolka develops a schoolgirl crush on her sister's fiancé, but she has no idea that Carla has promised him her virginity. So that night, Carla plies Tammy with champagne. Tammy soon becomes incapacitated. And while Homolka keeps her drugged on the anesthetic halothane, Bernardo rapes her throughout the night. They hadn't planned on killing her, but the drunken, defenseless teenager chokes on her own vomit. Homolka tries to revive her, but fails. So the two of them clean up the mess and make it look like an accident. Carla reveals her part in the manslaughter of her sister only after the plea bargain is agreed. But rather than cancel the deal, Canadian authorities accept Homolka's confession and extend her sentence by just 2 years. None of this information is made available to the court at Bernardo's trial.
I don't fault them for making the deal. I know other people do, but at the time that the deal was made, they had no evidence against either of them. They didn't even know that they were involved.
Shortly after the trial, Homolka and Bernardo's house is demolished before a crowd of grateful neighbors and an emotional Debbie Mahaffey, the mother of their victim, 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey.
When this house comes down, it comes down for all victims in my mind, everywhere. That's why I wouldn't mind throwing a brick and seeing if I couldn't hit that top window.
When Carla Homolka is released from prison on July 5th, 2005, after serving her 12 years, she doesn't return to her hometown, but is given a new identity and moves over 300 miles away to the city of Montreal. She lives anonymously until she's eventually tracked down.
Hi. Carla, can I ask you a question? You have anything to say to us?
Nothing.
A lot of people in your neighborhood don't like the fact that you're living here. Anything to say about that? How's your last